Good afternoon, everyone. Jamie Cooper here with Cannabiz Connection, Cannamedia Works. We are live right now. We are here to talk about the new bulletin that was released from LARA regarding CBD. Last week, LARA had issued a bulletin clarifying their stance on CBD. And so I felt there was this need to kind of host this panel because over the last week, there has been a lot of different information circulating, and what better to get information that we need than talking about talking with regulators themselves and some CBD experts as well. So here with me, I have Andrew Brisbo. He is the director of the Marijuana Regulation Board here in Michigan. Then we have attorney Matt Abel, executive director of Michigan NORML. He's a MiLegalize board member as well. And then we have Peter Boehm, and he is with the CBD Depot, right? That's a wellness depot.
That's right.
And you are very involved in the hemp and CBD industry. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your afternoon to help us educate the business owners and patients of Michigan, essentially. First, I want to talk to Andrew. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your position with LARA?
Sure. I'm the director of the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation, which is a new agency within LARA that was formed after the bills were passed in 2016 to start regulating facilities that are involved in the cultivation, transportation, processing, sale, and testing of medical marijuana in Michigan.
Okay, Andrew. So last week, you guys released this new bulletin. Can you give us a little bit of explanation of what it means and what changed, essentially?
Well, that's where some of the confusion stems from, I think, is that nothing actually changed. What we wanted to do was clarify how marijuana is defined in Michigan and what it applies to. Particularly as we started to ramp up our field operations with this new program and start getting out there and interacting with facilities, there was definitely some confusion about marijuana-derived products and what was regulated. And we wanted to clarify that in the definition in Michigan that all products that are derived from marijuana, as it's defined there, are covered within this new regulatory program and are subject to both the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act and the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. And that doesn't just apply to products with THC, but applies to all products that are derived from marijuana.
Okay, and so was there any specific reason that you guys released this bulletin? Were you getting a lot of phone calls about it? Like what really kind of made you do it?
Yeah, so there's been a little bit of awareness on our side that this issue was kind of brewing because we did get questions about it. And the reason we decided to issue the advisory bulletin was instead of answering all these questions one at a time that were coming in that were very similar in nature, we thought it best just to put it out more broadly to try and address all of those questions. I think it's important for us to make sure that proprietors of businesses that may be selling some of these products that are subject to regulation are aware of how it's defined within the Michigan law. So that they can adjust accordingly if necessary and are aware of how we're viewing it and how it's being interpreted and applied in Michigan.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andrew. Matt, now I am going to ask you a couple of questions. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I think your microphone might be on mute. You might want to unmute. Tell us a little bit about yourself and yeah.
I'm in Detroit, so there's a lot of background noise, So I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer 32 years and practicing marijuana law for several years before medical marijuana came around. I was lucky enough to be able to build the law firm where I am now. We have 5 lawyers plus 2 of counsel and do everything from criminal defense, which is going away hopefully, to most of our work now is in the business licensing and regulatory advice and assistance consultation area. There are a lot of tax implications and all types of, it covers so many different areas of law. So it's really an interesting and fast moving practice.
Okay, well, are there any steps that can be taken perhaps to what's going to happen now with LARA making this stance and people are asking, well, what can happen really? Like,
Well, I'm pretty liberal, but as a lawyer, I have to be conservative. And when people have asked my opinion about CBD, I've said CBD is any part of the plant Cannabis sativa L. And so as the definition goes, that would make it illegal. The sole exception may be oil that's made from imported industrial product, and that's the odd thing about that. It can only be from imported, not domestic. And hopefully this will put additional pressure. I think it's interesting. I said to somebody the other day, I think a lot of regular people have been lulled into, well, I can use CBD and it's not psychoactive, so it's not marijuana, and I don't have to worry about it. And so it's as I see it as director at NORML, it's bringing a lot more people to the fight, people who've now been indoctrinated, if you will, or have been exposed and are now used to a really great product that works topically. And by the way, Andrew, how come we can only have topicals with, 6% THC? So I have some skin issues, and I know other people who do as well. And we're going to be purchasing stuff that is designed for smoking and rubbing it on our skin, because we can buy more concentrated products to smoke than we can use as a topical. And I think that needs to be addressed in the permanent rules and modified. I don't see any reason, aside from a transdermal patch. I don't think there's no evidence that you can get intoxicated from topical ointment. So I just want to mention that. Thank you, Jamie, for the time. So that's what we do. I'm an activist, and I think industrial hemp is a great thing, and CBD is a great thing, but we need to push Congress to take marijuana and THC off the Schedule 1. I don't know what Schedule CBD is federally, but it doesn't matter if the state law says any part of the plant.
Well, one question I wanted to ask is, what happens with legalization being on the ballot in November? What happens then? Like, what happens with hemp and CBD?
Well, hemp is completely allowed and encouraged under the legalization proposal. Hemp will be exempt from taxation. And so we hope it will encourage the farm community to grow it as a food crop and as a textile, and for paper and other, I guess that's textile, but for other non-medical or non-ingestion or other uses. But there's a lot of nutritional value in cannabis and hemp. We've had hemp cereals and things like that on the market for years in the United States. So the nutritionists love it. It's just, it's always a fight, right?
Right. Okay, Andrew, back to you. I wanted to ask, so obviously if it's derived from hemp, you're saying that essentially it's legal. And so what is that classification between the cannabis and the hemp? And the second part of the question is it going to have to be labeled like how it's derived? Is it going to have to be labeled that it's derived from the stalks and the seeds?
So to clarify, we didn't say that if it's derived from hemp, it's legal. Hemp is the male form of the cannabis sativa plant. The law doesn't differentiate between the male and female of the species. So anything that's derived from marijuana is still subject to the regulatory program. And you're right that the definition in the Public Health Code, which carries forward to both the MMMA and the MMFLA, exempts the seeds oils derived from the seeds or the stalk or any preparation of the stalk from that definition of marijuana. So anything that's derived from those parts of the plant are not subject to the regulatory program.
So does this mean that consumers need to look on the bottle to say that it's derived from the oil from the seed or derived from the stalks? Is that what the consumer is looking for in order to consume it without having a medical marijuana card?
I do think they need to be aware of what they're getting from these products. And, we looked at studies that provided evidence, and there probably are other studies out there that may conflict, but the studies we looked at indicated that deriving CBD from stalks or seeds was generally speaking, not possible, or at least not practical to a large extent. So I do think it's important for consumers to know exactly what they're getting, and that's part of the reason we have a regulatory program. When it comes to these products, consumers have the right, and patients in this circumstance have the right to know that the products they're getting contain exactly what the labels say they contain, and to ensure that it's been tested to the safety standards that we promulgated in our rules, and that they can be assured that taking these products is safe for human consumption and can be applied for the uses for which they intended to be used.
Okay, Peter, so I'm going to go to you now. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and your expertise regarding hemp and CBD.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure. Prior to being in this industry, I had a 25-year career where I spent a significant amount of time in big box retail, co-founded one of the first cloud companies in the mid-90s, and at one point in time ran a music label, and learned how to turn $50 million into 3 obsolete computers and a t-shirt. About 4 years ago, I was tasked by a firm out of the UK to study the US cannabis market. And through the series of those efforts, I came to learn more about CBD and became fascinated with, its use and application. And while personally I'm not anti-cannabis or THC, I am a huge proponent of better understanding the medicinal and therapeutic uses of all portions of the plant. In this case, primarily CBD. And that begs a lot of questions. And Andrew, I don't envy your role whatsoever in what you're doing and trying to accomplish, in this particular arena. But that shared, I think, so to answer the question, I own CBD. We have 3 initiatives. We have CBD Wellness Depot, which is a precursor to a national chain we intend to roll out of what's called the GNC of CBD at some point. But currently we're distributors serving over 800 businesses, primarily in the Midwest as well as the Southeast. We also are launching the first national health and wellness app for the cannabis industry by an app that I wrote the plan for in 1999 that's been licensed by GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Unilever, and a variety of Fortune 100 companies. And then lastly, we're looking at an aggregate group purchasing organization to help companies save money, specifically in the cannabis and cannabis adjacent space. But, specific to CBD in this instance, the questions that I have, and while I certainly can appreciate, LARA's attempt at trying to define and better, clarify a lot of the questions that have surrounded CBD, it still, unfortunately, begs a lot of questions specific to, CBD and its origination. Yes, there are a lot of reports that say that it's basically impossible to extract, cannabidiol from stalks and seeds and things along those lines. But new research is actually showing that CBD can be found in a variety of plants. For example, I had to take some notes, unfortunately, but there was a study done by the National Center for Biotechnology Information that has found that CBD is present in flax fibers, right? CBD is also present in hops in our industry. That's recently made an announcement in December of last year saying that they are now, they've now perfected the process in which they can extract CBD from hops. There's also studies that suggest that CBD can be found from black pepper. So I guess that begs the question then, in terms of origination, and the assumption is that it's hemp, or in this case, cannabis as well. There are a myriad of avenues in which, CBD can be extracted. In addition to that, we have CBG, which is yet another cannabinoid that's very similar and closely aligned to CBD. And that's not even mentioned, obviously, in the LARA interpretation or the document. So if you study CBG, it's actually becoming far more interesting in many ways than even CBD. And it's, by the way, CBG is cannabidiol. I can't say it. English is my second language. My apologies. But it's highly effective for glaucoma, depression, anti-inflammatory, and it's been shown to be a neuroprotectant just like CBD. And also there's studies in Israel that show it's inhibited the growth of cancer cells. So, again, there's all these compounds that, these cannabinoids that are not just exclusive to the cannabis family of plants that, I think we need to better understand. Let's go ahead and just make the assumption that it's consistent within hemp and cannabis. So the question that I have then is that Governor Snyder in 2014 signed a hemp bill. Unfortunately, to date, unless my numbers are inaccurate, there hasn't been one application aligned with an academic agricultural college that has allowed for any of this research to take place. The problem, I think, with LARA's interpretation now is that we're forcing, medical card holders to be able to purchase only THC, because the stark reality is that, or the harsh reality, is that, it's not cost effective to grow and cultivate hemp indoors. So let's make I think it's a reasonable assumption. And if you believe some of the studies that have been out there, the fastest growing user base in this market are the baby boomers, of which I made it by 2 weeks, unfortunately. Matt, I think you're there. And of course, there are also females over 35. So, given the fact that we do meet a lot of dispensary owners or provisioning center owners, we engage a lot of natural wellness doctors. We even sell to chains. We even sell to a hospital in Illinois. And speaking with those, medical practitioners, and meeting with the patients themselves, we're shocked at times to see how many of them are actually my age or older. I'm 54, who frankly don't want to get high. So the challenge that we have here in Michigan is the fact that, number one, we're the second most agriculturally diverse state in the United States behind California. So we have a lot of really good farmers and a lot of good growing space, but yet we have a program, on paper only, that we've not been able to do research. And we can only look at Kentucky, for example, that now has 12,000 acres of hemp, being grown. Just in 2016, a consortium of growers were able to generate $2 million out of a little bit more than 26 acres of hemp. But the problem is that if we try to bring this into an indoor cultivation, while I understand seed to sale, I certainly can appreciate chain of custody. I have enormous amount of respect for making sure we do the testing and we do the accurate disclosure. The big challenge is that, I'll give you an example. We just purchased 1,000 pounds of raw milled hemp from Kentucky. We had it extracted into a crude oil that I think the yield on that was a little bit less than 40 kilos. And then we had that further refined. It took it down to about 25 kilos. So we're talking about 2.5 acres worth of hemp. In this case, probably about 8,000 plants. The harsh reality here is that, it's just not cost effective. I think effectively what this document does, specific to CBD, it'll prevent a lot of the cultivators who are licensed to really focus on growing hemp, because obviously the real money is involved in cannabis. But let's not kid ourselves. And then what about the audience that doesn't necessarily want the psychoactive aspect of THC? And this is not a debate on entourage effect and all of that, but there are certain people who simply just don't want that feeling. And so I think that, while I applaud LARA's efforts to try to regulate and make some sense around this wild west of an industry, I think there's some glaring gaps that need to be addressed, and we need to really push forward on doing a hemp, a hemp research program to better understand not only, the plant as a remediating plant, its use and application as a biofuel in textile industries, and, basically replacing the plastic industries. In fact, we can generate thousands of jobs and millions, and if not billions of tax revenues for the state of Michigan. But more importantly, in terms of consumer safety and its use and application as a nutraceutical and supplement. So that's the big challenge that I find right now is that, I'll give you another example. We find CBD in echinacea. So, if we're going to go after, for example, the vape shops and the head shops and the health food stores that carry CBD, are we going to go after Kroger, Target, Meijer, any grocery chain that carries flax, that carries, black pepper, that carries hops, unpasteurized beer? All of those things have trace amounts of CBD. So, it just begs an enormous amount of questions specific to why can't we do a better job of distinguishing and separating between what is basically a relatively benign supplement in this particular instance, and we have rules and regulations in place and how we do disclaimers versus the FDA. We have the Federal Farm Act. We have the Omnibus Bill. We have the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals who have done an interpretation of the monetization of industrial hemp research programs, of which there are 16 states in the United States that have it, or I think it's actually 24, but 16 states have actually implemented them. And yet here we are, the second most agriculturally diverse state in the United States, and we can't get off the ground even though this bill has been signed into law since 2014. So again, I'm going to come back to the fact that CBD can found through a myriad of resources. How are we going to regulate that? How are we going to monitor that? How are we going to ensure that the patients, let's say the 1 in 10, so we're talking about 20,000 people. I'll give you an example. That 1,000 pounds of hemp that we had milled and turned into CBD crude, then it was further distilled into a highly concentrated version of CBD, could only provide 20,000 people with 1 month's supply of CBD. So again, from the law of just basic, simple economics, it doesn't make sense to take this to an indoor crop because it takes a lot of hemp plants to extract even small amounts of CBD in this particular case. So I think that while LARA in this case probably does have the population's best interest at heart, I still think there are an enormous amount of questions that need to be answered. And we really need to do a better job of distinguishing between hemp cultivation and cannabis grows, the monetization, the taxation of all the above, and really the engagement and the education of the consumer, as well as regulators and law enforcement, to better understand sometimes the subtle and sometimes the not so subtle differences between these plants as well as these compounds.
Okay, and I know we only have a couple more minutes, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I wanted to ask, what does the cannabis and hemp community, what do they need to do? What kind of future do we see in this evolving? Will it continue to be, do you feel like it's going to continue to be regulated the same as THC, or is there something that might be done elsewhere, like maybe changes to the Industrial Research Hemp Act that would make it change?
Was that for me, Jamie?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little at the beginning. So a lot of these things aren't within the scope of our control at this point. We have the definition of marijuana in Michigan as it stands, and we aren't regulating one cannabinoid versus another. We're regulating all products that are derived from marijuana. So we have to be sort of agnostic as to whether some people think it's a good idea or a bad idea. The legislature writes the laws. My job is to enforce it. I often use the analogy that a police officer doesn't get to decide what the speed limit should be on the street. They have to enforce what it is. And that's similar to our role, that this is the definition we have. And we feel as though one of the most important aspects of implementing this new program is educating the public, educating the industry as to what the law says and how it's being implemented. So we give everyone a fair chance to comply with it, and to ensure that they can start their business and operate their business and not get themselves into trouble. So that's been our main focus with this bulletin.
Well, thank you very much for educating and being here today and giving us your time. And thank you, Peter, as well. Thank you, Matt. And Andrew, one last question. What do people need to do to express maybe their concerns? How do they get a hold of LARA?
It's 3 o'clock.
It is 3 o'clock. That's true. They can always, we have our email addresses on the website, so they can certainly send us their questions or concerns there. Matt mentioned this earlier, that we're in the process of promulgating our next set of rules. So anyone that has issues or concerns that are related to the emergency rules or any part of that promulgation process can certainly send us their input. We're happy to receive that from all sources so we can ensure that all those concerns get addressed. And as we move forward with the program and lay out the regulatory structure, that we've considered all perspectives on it.
Now, will it also be a discussion within the board? I know we have a board meeting coming up the 31st. Will this be on the agenda, perhaps?
I think I will certainly present to the board some information about the dissemination of the advisory bulletin and what it means, and ensure that they're understanding why we chose to do it and what some of the reaction has been. And we want them to be informed as to our operations as well. But as I said, this is, from our perspective, an educational element and clarifying what's existing in statute, not making policy decisions.
Okay, Andrew, Peter, Matt, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure to talking each of you. And thank you, Andrew, one last time. And if you need information, stay tuned to the Cannabiz Connection Facebook page, and we'll be bringing you information there as it develops. Thanks so much. Bye, guys.